Coming up on Wings of Inspired Business.
When we do pleasurable things and we do certain things that actually raise like oxytocin, the pleasure hormone levels, we actually see hormones get balanced. We see weight regulates. We see we sleep better. We see that cortisol, the stress hormone, regulates. It actually changes the way our neurological system processes things. So it's like if we're having a hard time making decisions and there's a level of like, I don't know what to do, I'm not clear, all these different paths of these choices, they all have pros and cons, I can't see it. Stepping away and having time to sink into pure pleasure is where we are allowing our brain to actually work in a different way. And when we do that, we can have different ideas and creative solutions spontaneously arise as kind of a benefit from like actually stepping away and re-regulating our hormones and our stress and taking a moment for joy.
Launching and growing a business requires a level of dedication that can easily take over your life. It can seem like our work is never done. All too often, that translates into overwhelm and burnout. That's why my guest today, Diane Mueller, says our success depends on making time to enjoy the journey, and that we often accomplish more by putting our own pleasure first. Hi, I'm Melinda Wittstock. Welcome to Wings of Inspired Business, where we share the inspiring entrepreneurial journeys, epiphanies, and practical advice from successful female founders, so you have everything you need at your fingertips to build the business and life of your dreams. I'm a 5-time serial entrepreneur and the CEO and founder of Podopolo, the AI-powered interactive app revolutionizing podcast discovery and discussion and making podcasting profitable for creators. I'd like to invite you to take a minute, download Podopolo from either app store, listen to the rest of this episode there, and join the conversation with your questions, perspectives, experiences, and advice, because together we're stronger, and we all soar higher when we fly together. Today, we meet an inspiring entrepreneur on a mission to help women entrepreneurs overcome overwhelm. Dr. Diane Mueller is the founder of Fem Meets Fortune. She teaches women entrepreneurs how to accelerate the growth of their companies by building enterprises they genuinely enjoy running, rather than ones that run their lives. CEO and founder of 2 other businesses, the medical practice My Lyme Doc and the community My Libido Doc, she shares today how she juggles all of that without burnout or getting spread too thin. Diane will be here in a moment. First, if you love podcasts and wish you had an app that matched you to the exact right listens around what interests and inspires you and your friends without having to lift a finger, then Podopolo is for you. Podopolo is different from all the other podcast apps out there. It's fully interactive with instant recommendations from 5 million audio and video podcasts and an easy way to share and discuss with friends and your favorite hosts. Download Podopolo now. It's free in both app stores. And if you have a podcast, get it featured on our home Discover screen for free and access time-saving ways to grow your reach and your revenue. That's Podopolo. As women, it's easy to fall into the trap of trying to be all things to all people. That urge to people please, multitask, and do everything perfectly leads to overwhelm and burnout for many female founders, and it also stunts business growth. Our businesses end up running us, instead of us running our businesses. There is, of course, a better way, and it involves prioritizing our own pleasure. Now, of course, that's easier said than done, because we can all get so wrapped up in an endless to-do list, running faster and faster, without really getting anywhere. Dr. Diane Mueller runs 3 businesses, and as the founder of Fem Meets Fortune, she helps women entrepreneurs accelerate the growth of their businesses by building companies they enjoy. Today, she shares her system that evolved out of her own rice and bean years, building 3 successful companies, as she also struggled to overcome Lyme disease. Diane, who also runs My Lyme Doc and My Libido Doc, says that when we prioritize time in our schedules to simply have fun, we also balance our hormones, regulate stress, and experience clarity of thought and inspiration. In other words, we get more done when we're focused on being instead of just doing. So today we're going to get into her 3 commitments she says women must make in order to succeed, and much more. So let's put on our wings with the inspiring Diane Mueller, and be sure to download the podcast app Podopolo so we can keep the conversation going after the episode. Diane, welcome to Wings.
Thank you, Belinda. Excited to be here.
Well, I'm excited to have you, that you could fit me into your schedule, given the fact that you run not just one business or 2 businesses, but actually 3. I want to start with Femme Meets Fortune because you describe this as a side project to help women entrepreneurs. What are the main issues or struggles that women entrepreneurs are dealing with generally?
One of the things that I really see is overwhelm and trying to do everything oneself. Women, we are so naturally programmed with how our brains function. I'm going to talk about the answer to your question, even slightly in a medical way, since I am a doctor. I look at business and medicine in so many ways as actually quite similar. And one of the things that will happen with women is because of what estrogen does to our brains, estrogen actually makes us really, really good at noticing all the little details of what's wrong in the surroundings, around multitasking, around seeing so many different things that need to be attended to, which has its inherent value. And like anything, there's strengths and weaknesses with so many different components of life. And one of the struggles that happens with estrogen in the female brain is that it can lead to easy overwhelm. So one of the biggest things that I find is like trying to do everything oneself, going into overwhelm really quickly, and basically trying to take on so much that nothing is actually done totally well. So I imagine I'll pause here because I imagine that's going to lead into some follow-up questions.
We see this all the time. And when you combine it actually with perfectionism, which in my experience with all the women I've mentored and just how many times that comes up on this podcast, when you combine an urge towards perfectionism with that multitasking, have to do it all to have it all kind of thing, that's definitely a recipe not only for burnout and health problems, but it just stalls the growth of any business, which could be part of the reason why, not the only reason, but part of the reason why only 3% of women entrepreneurs make it to more than $1 million in their annual revenues.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's one of the biggest things. Like there's a great book out there by Dan Sullivan and Dr. Benjamin Hardy called Who Not How. And I feel like this, like just the premise, you can even tell by the title of the book, kind of the premise of what this book goes into. Really well done. But the essence of the book really comes down to exactly that. Around so many times we think that, okay, in order to get to to wherever our goals are professionally, that we need to do it ourselves. And if we don't have the money and we don't have say a bank backing us, and we can't, we don't think we can afford somebody, then we just try to figure it out ourselves. But the problem with that is that really can lead to a lot of overwhelm, as well as not hiring the people that actually know how to do certain things better than us. So, a lot of like building businesses and staying out of overwhelm and staying out of multitasking and really enjoying the process is putting together systems and strategies for what can you start taking off your plate as soon as possible, who can do it better than you, and how can you begin to arrange things in your overhead in your life so that you can slowly start chipping away at your task by actually finding more who's. So it's such a good book to really illustrate that point.
I've found that, a lot of women tend to put off hiring, perhaps too late. Even if your first hire, say in a business, is an executive assistant working or a VA of some kind, working just even a couple hours a week, if that frees you up to make that sale or make the use of your time more effective, that's going to be a game changer for your business. And yet, I think often we can make the mistake of looking at hiring as an expense rather than as an investment. How do you help women hire the right people, the who, early enough in the game in their companies?
Yeah, I like to take women through an exercise I call the boxes exercise. So it's basically getting a big piece of paper or a poster board or a whiteboard, whatever you want to use, and making a bunch of boxes. And in every box, put every activity you do. Now, I mean, every activity, meaning if you have a brick and mortar where you take out the trash, that goes in a box, right? If you make sure the all the bills get paid, if you call the companies when credit card needs changing, right? Anything that is your job related to business. And it's nice to do this in personal life too. But from the business standpoint, like every single job goes down. And most women, when they do this, it is not uncommon to have over 100 different boxes. Like, so, that's like the first level of like, holy cow, like,
Because you don't even realize, like, because there's so many
no.
things that you just do, like, just even in your given day. And it's not just the business things, it's all the other things. It's like, oh, yeah, okay, just ahead of this call, I'm going to put on the laundry. And then, oh, yeah, and then here's this thing for the dog. And then the kid, and right? And when you add all those things in as well.
Yes, exactly right. And like when you think about all these things, it's like it's a ton of different things. So, level one is really just looking at this and saying, like, okay, taking bird's eye view. What would a logical way of looking at this, would it be logical to say that this is actually sustainable? And and it's pretty easy to look at all of these different things and be like, oh yeah, like you said, you use the word burnout. Like I'm going to get burnt out if I continue this pace. So some of it, I find that knowledge is, so helpful for making decisions because it's so easy to be like, well, it can't be that bad. It's just taking out the trash. But when you could see all of it compounding, that's really the first standpoint. And then the next stand with this boxes activity is then to go through and you can use a number system, you can use a color coding system, but the idea is to essentially rate the boxes. So we're rating them with the jobs that are like the most essential that you do, that they would be hard to train for, that like they're kind of your highest level of, kind of power in your business, your unique skill set. So, that could be a certain color or it could be a 10, all the way down to like, well, I'm doing this because like it has to happen. It's part of it. The trash needs to be taken out, but like it's a really easy thing to train for, which could be a 1 or a different color. And what you're doing with this, you're not just giving yourself insight, but you're actually building your job description out of your task so that when you could say, okay, well, if you rated these jobs from 1 to 10, then job 1 to 3, like, well, these are the things that don't require your skill set. So that's your job description. And like you said, like, even if it's starting with like 2 hours a week, but that 2 hours a week, now you're able to put more into your greater task. It's amazing how quickly like that will actually turn back into revenue.
Yeah, it's really prioritizing your time. Where is the most leverage? Like if I do this one thing today, which one thing has a multiplicity of outcomes? Which one drives the business, forward if I have to choose? And I think when you start to get into that mindset of actually having clarity, but I think sometimes we fall in the trap of thinking, I guess maybe it's because of that estrogen thing, right? Like we think we're good multitaskers, but that doesn't make it so. Just
Yes.
because there are lots of studies that show that when people multitask and they're going from, they have a context switching kind of 15 to 30 minutes when their minds are kind of partly in what they were doing, but they're not 100% in what they're doing next. And the context switch just loses lots of actual focused capacity, if you will.
100%. 100%. I mean, that's where like all the concept of like, Pomodoro technique or block scheduling and these types of things around like block, work, then break. And these little tiny things that people do around like, how many times do you check your email a day? Every time you check your email in the middle of a task, what you're, talking about is like, you're like moving your brain and you can literally lose 10 to 30 minutes of effective brain time just by stopping what you're doing and having that kind of impulse to be like, I have to check my social media, or I have to check my email, or I have to check my text, or whatever it is. So becoming more focused, like, certain parts of the day, I actually have my phone turned off, on days where I'm just like really working on my business for that reason around like, okay, these points of the day are just for this project. I can't be interrupted. And it's amazing what can happen from productivity when we are actually that focused.
Or I even calendarize these things.
Yep.
Talk about something called deep work, and and if I'm in that, I'm like working on my business, not in it. And that's a big distinction too, right? Knowing the difference between working on it or in it.
And I feel like a lot of people are becoming more, I think like so many of us in the business world talk about that. So I think people are becoming more and more aware of the differences. But I think the problem is like, even though people are aware of the differences, it's really good to have reminders because it's so easy. You know, one of the things that I find that happens with like dopamine and how dopamine works on the body, right? So it's like every time we actually get a task done, like send an email out, we actually get a dopamine hit in our brain, right? Our brain releases dopamine that makes us feel productive, that makes us feel motivated, it makes us feel like we did something. And so one of the things that can happen when we're like just like tasking of things like that are kind of in our business, right? Not working on the bigger picture of on our business. I know in another podcast interview you did, I heard you guys talk about the difference between in the business as like the current projects, and then on the business is like thinking about your future. And I love that definition, that way of defining it. And so many times I think what can wind up happening is we get this when we're working in the business and we're doing the day to day of the acute things that need to get done to keep it running. Oftentimes we get so much more dopamine because we're like knocking off tasks a lot faster and getting that reward, that chemical reward to the brain. So it can be really challenging to bring us, ourselves back to be like, oh, I have to work on the future of my business. Oh, and we don't get the dopamine hit in the same way. So it's so easy to lose track of.
Oh gosh, especially when you factor in how just the impact social media has had on our brains, because they're wired to just have you. It's why they're so addictive.
Yes.
Because they know this about us, and and it doesn't really keep you focused on where you need to go. So as you were building your businesses, My Lime Doc and My Libido Doc, was this something that you struggled through to kind of figure this out on your own? I mean, how much trial and error was there around this and perhaps other challenges? We all have them as entrepreneurs.
So the first business I did, which I've since sold. First business I did, I sold, and that was where I feel like there's always trials and error, right? But I feel like that was like my big trial and error business where I got it off the ground, working like three part-time jobs. The first year I call it my rice and bean year because that's basically what I was eating because I had so many debt collectors calling me. I didn't know if my lights were going to get turned off. It was like blood, sweat, tears. Like I had no idea what I was doing. And I grew that to a 7-figure business. I sold it. And that was like pretty amazing to be like, take that level of growth, like from literally, can't eat hardly anything. I have to live on rice to that level of success. And one of the things I talk to female entrepreneurs about some is the 3 commitments. And one of the first commitments I learned about throughout my own trials was what I call the commitment to space. And so one of the things that happened when I was getting things off the ground and I was working these part-time jobs to kind of just like stay afloat was there was some point where when my business started building and taking off, I ran out of time, and there was this like kind of math equation where it's like I still needed those 3 businesses to really like cover my overhead, but I was running out of time to really like I didn't have time, but I didn't have enough money. So it's like if I quit my jobs, I was going to have the time to really put in on the business. But if I kept my jobs, I would be okay more financially, but then I'd be in the position where I didn't have time to work on my business and it was going to be stalled. So the commitment to space is really where, kind of born out of that around like there was a point where I just realized like something has got to give and I got to take a chance on myself. Now, I recommend everybody do that like with calculations and thoughtfulness and, and planning and, all of that. But that commitment to space to be like, okay, I'm going to go all in. I was really, really close to being there where it could actually sustain me. So then I quit my jobs and I was running life at a slight deficit, which I very quickly, in about 6 weeks, all of a sudden was running no longer at a deficit, was able to be positive and pay myself. And that really came from actually opening up and committing to having that space to say, this is my thing and I'm going to be all in.
Did you know that 85% of podcasters don't make any money from podcasting? Yep, even though podcasting is the fastest growing media of all time. That has to change, and that's why I founded Podopolo, the interactive podcasting app with AI that matches you and your podcast to its perfect and growing audience. Podopolo is free, it's effortless, and it makes podcasting profitable for creators like you and me. Get started by downloading Podopolo and just click Get Featured on the home Discover screen to unlock supercharged promotion for your podcast and much more. You can learn more at podopolo.com/podcaster. And we're back with Diane Mueller, founder of Femme Meets Fortune. You mentioned the planning around that too. I mean, because that always, life rarely, especially for entrepreneurs, goes according to plan. So sometimes even those best laid plans of how all the numbers are going to work don't necessarily kind of work out. I mean, did yours work to plan, or did you have
Yeah.
surprises
Yeah.
along the way?
Yeah, mine worked to plan. And some of that is just, knowing like the simple things that we know, when we're really learning entrepreneurship around like, okay, how many, at like price points and overhead and all that, like how many more people do I really truly need? How many more clients do I really truly need to be able to make up for this? And once I actually did the math and realized, like, I don't actually remember the numbers anymore, but like realized it was not very many. It was not very many. So then it was like, really, thinking through like, okay, well, where are clients coming from? Where's the number one source of clients coming from? Okay, well, this is the number one source clients are coming from. How can I use my time to really triple down on that area? Because that's where I'm getting the most clients. So it's still, it still was a risk. Like there still was a level of maybe I would have needed to take out a bank loan. Maybe I would have needed to go back and get another job. There's always that risk that things don't go according to plan. But because I was calculated and figured out like, oh, this is where I need to triple down on my time. This is where some of my clients, the large portion of my clients are coming from. So if I set myself up to triple down time on that, the odds are really stacked in my favor.
Right. And you have kind of the clarity and peace of mind. Like it's very difficult to get anywhere where you don't have a roadmap in your own mind about how you're going to get there, because then you're just sort of like you're wandering around in the fog, right? So having that clarity is really important. So space is the first of the three commitments. What's the second one?
So the second one is truth. And the truth is largely being honest with ourselves about where we are. So, like the boxes exercise is like an example of truth, or like being what we're talking about earlier around like being on our email too much is the example of truth. Like, truth is actually being able to look at that thing in the eye and say, like, oh crap. Well, it hurts my ego to admit that I'm doing that. It hurts my ego maybe to admit that, like, maybe I'm not as good at one of these boxes. Like, I kind of stink at one of these boxes. Like, that's like not very good for the ego, right? It's like, no, I can't, that email thing can't be affecting me that much. Actually, I check it 100 times a day. Like, so being able to look at these things for what they are and actually not worry about them hurting our ego and just being honest with ourselves. That's true.
Yeah, like not being in shame about it. It doesn't say anything bad about you. It's just understanding, where you are. I saw a LinkedIn post, I think Sir Richard Branson put in there the other day, where it showed a lineup of animals, like an elephant, an ape, a fish, all these different types of animals. And with somebody saying, okay, now there's only one test for this. How well do you all do climbing up the tree?
Yeah.
you know,
Yes.
everybody has different strengths or weaknesses. So being able to understand the truth of what is your genius superpower, what's your zone of excellence, where are you, okay, competent, but someone could be better, and what's your zone of suck, right? And like, and
Yes,
having
exactly.
that honesty without shame or judgment, so that's a big personal growth step for just about everybody.
It is. It is. And like, and it's every time, even in my own personal life, I'm like, oh yeah, like I'm totally being honest with myself. And then it's like a punch in the face where I'm like, okay, well, maybe I didn't see that as much as I did, thought I did. So it's a area where I think if we're that's kind of the idea of like the commitment. Like the idea is like, it's like a lifetime journey, right? It's not like we say, oh, we're just going to see this and it's going to be here all the time. It's like, we're going to keep coming back to the question of like, what am I not being honest with myself about? What am I not, wanting to see, and continuing to explore that. And like you said, without judgment, without shame, without guilt, with like kindness and compassion, but also with open eyes.
100%. Okay, what's the third?
The third is time. And time, from a time perspective, that's also, it's somewhat of what we've talked about around like, what does time look like, block timing, how to be efficient, but it's also wrapped up in time is like time, not just in our business and on our business, but how to set up our life and how to set up our time in a way where we are also committed to ourselves. And something I love to talk to the women about that I work with is the in the time realm is also the commitment with setting aside time for pleasure. And that's one of the unique things that I really talk about in my business coaching school is really this idea around pleasure, because pleasure is a way of regulating everything else. When we do pleasurable things and we do certain things that actually raise like oxytocin, the pleasure hormone levels, we actually see hormones get balanced. We see weight regulates. We sleep better. We see that cortisol, the stress hormone regulates. And this is like stuff that there's literature, there's medical literature about these sorts of things I'm talking about. And so what winds up happening when we actually drop and we commit to time, not just for our business on and in, but also to ourselves for pleasure, is it actually changes the way our neurological system processes things. So it's like if we're having a hard time making decisions and there's a level of like, I don't know what to do, I'm not clear, all these different paths of these choices, they all have pros and cons, I can't see it. Stepping away and having time, at least on a weekly basis, I like to encourage people, even, on a daily basis. I understand that that gets sometimes hard, but at least on a weekly basis to really have time to sink into pure pleasure is of where we are allowing our brain to actually work in a different way. And when we do that, we can have different ideas and creative solutions spontaneously arise as kind of a benefit from like actually stepping away and re-regulating our hormones and our stress, and taking a moment for joy.
Ah, vital. And I think very few women actually do that because it's almost like you're the last in a long line because we tend to put everyone else ahead of ourselves, right? So, you can easily get into a situation where you're kind of like working for your team, you're working for your kids, your partner, your this, your that, you got like everything. And then at the end of the day, like maybe there is a little bit of time left for you, maybe not, when you have a business. And so it really comes down to actually prioritizing that, like even to the point of putting in your calendar if you have to.
Yeah, exactly. And the reason I like talking about some of the medical component is kind of similar to like the boxes exercise, where it's so easy to be like, and like as you're like you said, it's so easy as women to fall into this. We are last. We do things for so many other people, and then there's nothing left for us. And so, just like with the boxes exercise, where there's that awareness of like, wow, I have more than 100 boxes of things I do on a daily basis, and it's like kind of awakening to the whole body of like, and the whole brain around, I can't continue in this fashion. Kind of similar with pleasure. I find that it's so impactful as a way of getting the brain to work better, of helping people to stay out of overwhelm and more balance, and to solve things in a more creative way. So it trickles down into every area of life. But when we actually understand things that are like motivating to us, typically as women, such as, you know, helping our stress response, helping maintain proper body weight, helping us sleep deeper, like these sorts of things. And we actually realize that taking time for that is directly related to all of those things. Sometimes it can help with that motivation around like, oh, okay, I want all of these things. These all things are all important to me. So I need to find ways of getting this in, because that's how I'm going to get these other things I want.
100%. So Diane, I mean, the fact that you're a doctor
Mhm.
and you bring all this medical understanding actually to entrepreneurship is really intriguing and interesting to me because you became an entrepreneur through your own medical challenge as well. You struggled with Lyme, and I'm sure that is one of the major reasons why you have a business called My Lyme Doc. Tell me what you went through, You also wrote a book about it. Tell me how you walked through that and how it influenced your career and your entrepreneurship.
Yeah, thank you. It was quite the journey. I started out really as a when I was young, I had a lot of just basic chronic constipation that was not able to be figured out by conventional medicine. I just kind of had a label of IBS, kind of put on me, and it's just like take some laxatives, you'll be fine. So it started out with that, which was a little bit concerning to me because I just had kind of this innate feeling on the body that if something was out of balance chronically like that, that was my body talking. So that was part of how I ended up going to naturopathic medical school, was that I was looking for a different way. And so what happened when up happening in school was while I was looking for like a different way of helping my own symptoms and my own curiosity about body, and I've always been like a scientist at heart, even from a young girl's age. But what happened in school was I started getting crazy symptoms. Like I started having memory loss where I would leave the house for a very short walk. Like around that time, I had such fibromyalgia and pain and chronic fatigue syndrome that walks were literally like this 5 minute thing around the block where I would like drag myself all 5 minutes. And during that time, I could actually leave my house and like start walking around the block and forget where I lived. And it was like it would come in these episodes. And these episodes, they would come like waves, and I would get really dissociated. I would have visual changes, and I would just be confused. And it would feel like the way I describe it is like I think this was probably only lasting like, seconds, but it could feel like minutes. Like it felt so scary to just have these like waves of like, I don't know where I am. I don't know what's happening. I can't see straight. Like, and so I would get these episodes, and then I was having situations where the pain was so bad that on certain days I wouldn't be able to walk. I had some instances where I would get stuck on the toilet, and my pain was so bad I couldn't actually clench my muscles to get off of the toilet, which was crazy embarrassing, but that was the story. And some days where I'd have such crazy feeling in my extremities where I couldn't drive because I couldn't feel the steering wheel. So things like that. And so it really was when I was in medical school, it was really easy for it to just get brushed off as medical school syndrome. And then when I graduated and my friends were getting better, like from their fatigue, and I was getting worse, that's when I really knew like, okay, this is not just like up till 3 in the morning drinking triple shots of espresso to study for the exam, and fatigue from that. It was really coming from a place of chronic illness. And that's when I found Lyme disease and lots of toxins and other microorganisms besides Borrelia, the bacteria that causes Lyme. And that's kind of what got me into the Lyme world.
It's so interesting to me how many entrepreneurs find their purpose through a struggle. It's sort of like at the time it must have felt it was happening to you. And now do you feel that that happened for you so you can help so many other people, not only as a thought leader in this area and as an expert, as a doctor, but also as an entrepreneur?
Yeah, I mean, I feel that way with all of my businesses. It's like I struggled with Lyme in the middle of all of that. Like, I was struggling. I've gone through periods of like really struggling with libido throughout my life. And then, like I said, like starting a business and living on rice and beans and having 13 debt collectors calling me and not knowing if my lights were going to turn off. Like all of those types of things. That's really what, kind of as a foundation of a lot of these, all of these businesses really is how I learned to overcome these. And as a scientist and a researcher, the biggest thing for me with all of these things is like going through these things really has set me in crazy research mode around like, okay, well, what are all the studies that have come out? Who are the other experts I can learn from? And, I'm just a lifelong learner. And so I think that's part of my passion is really learning and assimilating and trying to assimilate things for people in a way that's really distilled down to the most important parts so they can incorporate it into their lives without having to go through the same level of struggle, hopefully, that I have gone through.
Well, that's beautiful. So I want to make sure that people know how to find you and work with you. Perhaps they've struggled with mold or Lyme, or they have a friend or a relative in that situation, or the libido issue. You have with My Libido Doc, a very vibrant community there. But also how to get the best of your advice at Femme Meets Fortune. What's the best way?
Yeah, I mean, the easiest way to find links to all of that is if you just go to my personal website, drdianemueller.com. You'll see a link to all three of those different, businesses that I offer. And the way I onboard people through each of those businesses is slightly different. So really it just like, if you're interested in any of that, you can just go to drdianemueller.com. You can find links to the various types of things we're talking about, whether it's libido, whether it's Lyme, whether it's business coaching, all of that is on there for you. And that's kind of a one-stop shop to all of my offerings.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for putting your wings on with us today and sharing your inspiring journey.
Thank you. Thank you, Melinda. It's been a pleasure.
Diane Mueller is the founder of the coaching business Femme Meets Fortune, as well as My Lyme Doc and My Libido Doc. She's also the best-selling author of Use Your Mind to Heal Your Mold and Lyme, a survivor's guide. Make sure you download Podopolo, follow Wings of Inspired Business there, and join us in the episode comment section. That way we can all take the conversation further with your questions and comments. That's it for today's episode. Thanks for listening. Head on over to wingspodcast.com and subscribe to the show. When you subscribe, you'll instantly get my special gift, the Wings Success Formula. Women innovating, networking, growing, scaling is the Wings of Inspired Business formula for daily success in your business and your life. Inviting you to listen to Wings of Inspired Business on Podopolo, the interactive podcasting app where we can take the conversation further with your perspectives and questions. Plus, get advice on your business from me and my inspiring guests. Just follow Wings, make a clip of any of your favorite moments of any episode, and join the conversation in the comments section. Miss an episode of Wings? We've got more than 700 inspiring and actionable Wings of Inspired Business episodes to access on Podopolo and everywhere else, including melindawhitstock.com. If you like the show, be sure to subscribe, share with friends, and get the latest on Instagram at Melinda Whitstock 2020, Facebook at Wings Podcast or I am Melinda Whitstock, or Twitter at Melinda Wings. And of course, we love it when you share your feedback with a review on Apple Podcasts, a rating on Spotify, or sharing the love wherever it is you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening.